courtroom fell silent as Lila stood to speak, her voice trembling but clear. "I love my mom, but she wasn't there when I needed her. My dad was. He's the one who held us together." The weight of her words shattered the tension in the room, leaving Sam visibly shaken and the audience in stunned silence. It was a moment of raw truth, where innocence collided with betrayal, and the consequences of broken trust were laid bare for all to see. But before we dive deeper into this gripping story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. If you're enjoying this, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss another story like this. Elijah, a dedicated architect, sat at the dining table late into the evening, finalizing a crucial presentation. Needing a family photo to personalize his pitch, he casually asked Sam for her phone. To his surprise, she hesitated, clutching it tightly and brushing him off with a forced smile, saying, "I'll send it later." Her behavior struck him as odd, especially when she quickly locked the screen. Meanwhile, their 16-year-old daughter, Lila, was sketching quietly in the living room. A talented and imaginative teen with dreams of becoming an artist, she often drew inspiration from the family's happier moments Elijah feared were slipping away. Elijah couldn't ignore the growing distance in his marriage. Sam had always been active and engaging during family time, but recently she seemed perpetually distracted. Her phone, once left casually on the counter or nightstand, now rarely left her hand. Whether they were watching a movie together or sitting down for dinner, Sam was constantly texting or scrolling, her eyes glued to the screen. When Elijah asked her about it, she would wave him off with a curt, "Just work stuff," or an annoyed glance. Family interactions became increasingly strained. Conversations were short and punctuated with Sam's vague excuses to leave the room. Lila, ever observant despite her own teenage world, picked up on the change. "Dad," she said one evening as she sketched at the coffee table, "Mom seems so happy lately, but I don't know why. She's always smiling when she's on her phone." Her tone was casual, even lighthearted, as though she didn't fully grasp the implications of her observation. The comment struck Elijah like a jolt of electricity. He forced a neutral expression and replied, "Maybe it's just a busy time for her at work." But his mind was already racing. Why was Sam so happy, so engaged, when she was on her phone, yet so detached from her family? Lila's innocent remark fanned the flames of suspicion that had been smoldering in his heart. Sam's physical absence began to match her emotional one. She would come home later than usual, claiming back-to-back meetings or late-night deadlines. On weekends, she'd slip out for errands and return hours later with little to show for it. Elijah started noticing small inconsistencies in her stories, an extra coffee receipt in her purse, or a faint whiff of unfamiliar cologne. Lila continued to comment without malice, unaware of the tension she was stirring. "Mom said she had to work late yesterday, but I saw her Instagram story. She was at some rooftop restaurant," she mentioned one evening, showing Elijah the evidence on her phone. The photo was innocent enough, Sam sitting at a table with a cocktail in hand, but the caption, "Much needed escape," sent a pang through Elijah's chest. As days turned into weeks, Elijah felt his home becoming less of a sanctuary and more of a battlefield of unspoken truths. Sam's secrecy, Lila's innocent observations, and the growing chasm between them all pointed to something Elijah couldn't yet name, but he was certain it would change their family forever. The unease gnawed at Elijah until he couldn't ignore it anymore. Sam's increasingly secretive behavior, her late nights, and the stray clues that didn't add up were too much for him to dismiss. One evening, after she left for yet another work meeting, Elijah made a decision that filled him with both guilt and resolve. He installed a tracker on her phone, telling himself it was the only way to uncover the truth without a direct confrontation. Sitting in his dimly lit home office, Elijah watched as the tracker pinged her location. Not at the office, as she had claimed, but at a boutique hotel across town. His stomach dropped. He stared at the glowing map on his laptop, willing it to be a mistake, a glitch in the system. But the dot didn't move, and the reality set in like a lead weight. He decided to see it for himself. Driving to the hotel, his mind raced with possibilities, each one darker than the last. When he arrived, he parked in a shadowy corner of the lot and waited. He didn't have to wait long. Sam emerged from the hotel lobby, her arm linked with that of a younger man. They were laughing, their closeness unmistakable. The man leaned in, whispering something that made her giggle, and they walked off hand in hand toward a nearby restaurant. Elijah's chest tightened, a mix of rage, heartbreak, and disbelief coursing through him. He gripped the steering wheel, torn between storming over to confront them and driving away to process what he had just seen. But he knew this moment would change everything. He needed more than just his word against hers. When Sam returned home later that night, Elijah pretended to be asleep, his mind already plotting his next move. Over the next few days, he cloned her phone, a technical task that required patience and precision. Each step felt like a betrayal of his own morals, but the alternative, remaining in the dark? When the data transferred, Elijah braced himself for what he might find. The messages were explicit, filled with terms of endearment and plans for secret getaways. Photos accompanied them, selfies of Sam with the man from the hotel, Derek, a younger colleague from her office. There were messages from Sam describing her discontent at home, blaming Elijah for being too focused on work, for not seeing her. But there were also messages that celebrated their deceit, detailing the thrill of sneaking around. Elijah sat at his desk, staring at the evidence on his laptop. His hands trembled as he scrolled through the messages, each one a knife to the heart. He felt betrayed, humiliated, and devastated. This wasn't just a lapse in judgment on Sam's part. It was an ongoing affair, a calculated dismantling of their life together. The inner conflict consumed him. Should he confront Sam now, with all the evidence laid bare? Or should he wait, gather more information, and approach this methodically? His love for Sam clashed with his growing resentment, and his thoughts turned to Lila. How would this affect their daughter? What kind of example was this setting for her? In that moment, Elijah realized their family was already fractured, and the truth would either break them completely or pave the way for a painful, necessary change. Either way, his trust in Sam was irreparably shattered. It was a crisp morning when Elijah received the call that shook him to his core. The principal from Lila's school was on the other end, her voice urgent. "Mr. Carter, Lila collapsed during class. We've already called an ambulance and she's being taken to St. Mary's Hospital. You should head there right away." Elijah's heart pounded as he rushed to the hospital, his mind racing with worry. Lila had always been a healthy, vibrant girl, but lately he'd noticed she seemed more withdrawn. Her usual enthusiasm for drawing and painting had dimmed, and she had been complaining of headaches and fatigue. He'd attributed it to the typical stress of being a teenager, but now he feared it was something far worse. When he arrived at the hospital, he found Lila lying pale and frail in the hospital bed, an IV drip in her arm. A doctor entered the room explaining that her collapse was due to severe stress and exhaustion. "Her cortisol levels are elevated and it's taking a toll on her body," the doctor explained. "Whatever pressures she's under, they need to be addressed immediately." Elijah felt a wave of guilt wash over him. Was the tension at home affecting Lila more than he realized? He sat by her bedside, gently stroking her hand and whispering reassurances, determined to focus all his energy on helping her recover. Sam arrived nearly half an hour later, her face flushed with what Elijah assumed was guilt. But as she entered the room, she barely glanced at Lila before pulling her phone out of her pocket. "Is she okay?" she asked, her tone perfunctory as she began typing furiously on her screen. Elijah clenched his jaw, forcing himself to stay calm. "The doctor said it's stress. She's been under too much pressure." He looked at Sam, hoping for some acknowledgement of how their deteriorating family dynamic might be impacting their daughter. Instead, she murmured, "That's awful," while her thumbs continued dancing across her phone. For the next hour, Sam was physically present but emotionally absent. She occasionally glanced at Lila, but most of her attention was on her phone. Elijah couldn't help but notice her furtive smiles and the way she angled the screen away from him. At one point, she stepped out into the hallway, ostensibly to take a call, but her hushed tone and quick footsteps only confirmed Elijah's suspicions. It had to be Derek. When she returned, Elijah couldn't hold back any longer. "Sam," he said quietly but firmly, "our daughter is lying here in a hospital bed and you're glued to your phone. What could possibly be so important?" Sam looked startled but quickly recovered. "I was checking in with work," she said, a little too quickly. "There's a big deadline coming up." Elijah's resentment bubbled to the surface. He didn't believe her, and he doubted she even cared if he did. The way she prioritized Derek, even in a moment like this, was a slap in the face. Watching her divide her attention while their daughter lay vulnerable only deepened the chasm between them. As Leela stirred slightly in her sleep, Elijah made a silent vow. He would no longer stand by while Sam's choices harmed their family. It was time to act, not just for himself, but for Leela. She deserved better than a mother who couldn't even put her phone down in a crisis. Elijah had finally decided to move forward with the divorce, a decision that weighed heavily on his heart. He didn't want his life, or Lila's, entangled in Sam's lies any longer. As he gathered financial documents in preparation for the legal proceedings, he uncovered something that turned his simmering anger into a full-blown fury. Reviewing their joint bank accounts, Elijah noticed significant withdrawals over the past year. Vacations, luxury shopping, and expensive dinners, none of which he or Lila had experienced. At first, he thought it might be a mistake, but the pattern was undeniable. One particular charge stood out: a weekend getaway at a resort he'd never heard of, perfectly coinciding with one of Sam's business trips. His chest tightened as he realized the truth. Sam had been draining their savings to fund her affair with Derek. She hadn't just betrayed him emotionally, she'd stolen their family's financial security. That money had been meant for Lila's college fund, for their future, for the life they'd worked so hard to build together. Elijah felt a surge of anger so intense it left him shaking. How could she justify this? How could she take from her own child to fuel her selfish escapades? This wasn't just betrayal, it was theft, plain and simple. He immediately contacted his lawyer, determined to ensure this information would come to light during the divorce proceedings. He wanted Sam to face the full consequences of her actions, both legally and financially. Just as Elijah was finalizing his case, another twist in the tangled web of deceit came to light. Derek, the man who had been the catalyst for this chaos, was beginning to panic. Word of the impending divorce had reached him, and he knew that if the affair became public, his career could be at risk. Elijah first became aware of Derek's desperation while reviewing new messages he'd intercepted from Sam's phone. In these texts, Derek was no longer the charming, carefree man he'd appeared to be. His tone was sharp, almost threatening. "If this gets out, I'll make sure everyone knows it wasn't just me," Derek wrote. "I'll tell them you manipulated me, that you lied about your marriage. You'll lose everything." Sam tried to calm him, pleading, "No one has to know. Elijah won't do anything to make this worse for Lila. I can handle it." But Derek wasn't reassured. In the following days, his texts escalated. He demanded money, large sums, far beyond what Sam had already spent on their relationship. "If you don't pay up, I'll go to HR. I'll tell them you pursued me. They'll fire you and your precious reputation will be destroyed." Elijah read these messages with growing disbelief. Derek was threatening to blackmail Sam, turning on her the moment his own interests were at stake. It was a toxic cycle of deceit, one that seemed to be spiraling out of control. Elijah's initial reaction was to use this to his advantage. If Derek testified against Sam in court, or if Elijah exposed these messages, it would guarantee a favorable outcome in the divorce. Sam would not only lose custody, but also face professional and social ruin. It was tempting, after all. Hadn't she already taken so much from him? But as Elijah stared at the messages, doubt began to creep in. Using Derek's threats as leverage felt like stooping to their level, a betrayal of the values he had always tried to uphold. He thought of Lila and the example he wanted to set for her. Was revenge worth compromising his integrity? Would it truly make things better, or would it drag them all down further into this pit of lies and pain? For the first time in weeks, Elijah hesitated. He couldn't ignore the damage Sam and Derek had caused, but he also couldn't bring himself to use Derek's threats as a weapon. Instead, he forwarded the messages to his lawyer, asking for advice on how to handle the situation legally and ethically. His lawyer agreed that the messages could be valuable, but cautioned against escalating the conflict unnecessarily. Focus on what matters: getting custody of Lila and securing your financial stability. Don't let this become a battle of egos. You're better than that. Elijah decided to take the high road. He wouldn't stoop to Derek's level, but he wouldn't ignore the evidence either. He would present the financial deception and the affair in court, letting the judge see the full picture. But he wouldn't exploit Derek's threats. not because Sam deserved mercy, but because Elijah refused to compromise his character for revenge. As the pieces fell into place, Elijah's resolve solidified. He was no longer the man blindsided by betrayal, paralyzed by disbelief. He was a father determined to protect his daughter and rebuild his life. Sam and Derek's actions had left a trail of destruction, but Elijah was ready to rise above it. He would fight, not with the same cruelty and deceit they had wielded, but with honesty, strength, and unwavering purpose. Elijah sat at the dining table, his laptop open and the evidence spread before him like pieces of a puzzle he wished he didn't have to solve. The bank statements, text messages, and photos he'd uncovered were undeniable, and the time for confrontation had come. The air was thick with tension as he waited for Sam to come home. He rehearsed his words in his head, but nothing seemed adequate to capture the betrayal he felt. When Sam walked through the door, she seemed surprised to see him waiting. "You're home early," she said casually, setting her purse down. Elijah didn't respond right away, instead motioning for her to sit across from him. She hesitated, sensing the gravity of the moment. "We need to talk," he said, his voice steady but firm. Sam's expression flickered with unease, but she composed herself quickly. "What's this about?" she asked, her tone defensive. Elijah didn't waste time with pleasantries. He turned the laptop toward her, displaying the bank statements and screenshots of her texts with Derek. "This," he said, his voice tightening, "this is what it's about. The lies, the betrayal, the money you stole from our family. All of it." Sam's face drained of color as she scanned the screen. For a moment, she seemed lost for words, but then her defensive instincts kicked in. "You were spying on me?" she accused, her voice rising. "That's an invasion of my privacy." Elijah's eyes burned with anger, but he kept his tone controlled. "Don't you dare try to turn this around on me, Sam. I wouldn't have had to dig if you hadn't been hiding things. You've been lying to me, to Lila, for over a year. You drained our savings, money meant for Lila's future, to fund vacations and gifts for Derek. And now he's threatening you for more." Sam flinched at Derek's name, her composure faltering. "You don't understand," she said weakly. "I wasn't happy, Elijah. You were always working, always focused on your projects. I felt invisible." Elijah's jaw tightened as he stared at her, disbelief etched across his face. "So your solution was to destroy our family? To cheat? To lie? To steal? I was working to provide for us, Sam. For you, for Lila. And while I was doing that, you were busy tearing everything apart." Sam's eyes filled with tears, but Elijah didn't soften. "I made mistakes," she said, her voice trembling. "But I'm not the only one to blame here. You shut me out." "Stop," Elijah interrupted, his voice cutting through her excuses. "I won't let you rewrite the narrative. Whatever problems we had, this isn't how you handle them. You didn't just betray me, you betrayed Lila. She's the one who's going to suffer the most because of your selfishness." Sam's tears spilled over, but Elijah remained resolute. "I'm done, Sam. I've already spoken to a lawyer, I'm filing for divorce, and I'll fight for full custody of Lila. You've shown me where your priorities lie, and it's not with this family." Sam tried to plead, her words a jumble of apologies and justifications, but Elijah had heard enough. He stood, gathering the documents. "This isn't just about us anymore," he said. "It's about what kind of example we're setting for Lila, and I refuse to let her grow up thinking this kind of betrayal is acceptable." As he walked away, leaving Sam sobbing at the table, Elijah felt a mix of heartbreak and resolve. The woman he once loved was gone, replaced by someone he no longer recognized, but his path forward was clear, and he was determined to protect what was left of his family. The courtroom was tense, the air thick with the weight of the proceedings. Elijah sat at the plaintiff's table, his lawyer by his side, while Sam sat across from him, visibly anxious. Despite her composed appearance, the cracks in her facade were showing, especially after Derek had been subpoenaed to testify. Derek arrived that morning, his usually confident demeanor subdued. He avoided looking at Sam as he took the witness stand. Elijah watched him carefully, feeling a mix of vindication and anger. This man had played a role in the destruction of his family, but now he was about to dismantle Sam's credibility in court. Under oath, Derek admitted to the affair, providing detailed accounts of their relationship. He testified about the expensive gifts Sam had bought him, The trips they had taken together, trips funded by the joint savings account Elijah had painstakingly built. Derek's voice was flat and calculated, his answers concise. It was clear he was cooperating fully to protect his own career. "I want to be clear," Derek said, glancing briefly at the judge. "I deeply regret my actions, but I was unaware of the extent of the deception until recently. When I found out about the financial discrepancies and the ongoing divorce, I chose to come forward to ensure my role in this situation was addressed transparently." Sam's lawyer tried to discredit Derek, questioning his motives and suggesting he was only testifying to save himself. But the damage had already been done. Derek's testimony provided indisputable proof of Sam's affair and the financial deception, painting her as reckless and untrustworthy. When the judge called for a recess, Sam's face was pale, her hands trembling. Elijah couldn't bring himself to feel pity. She had made her choices, and now she was facing the consequences. As the custody battle intensified, Elijah presented a compelling case for why he should be awarded full custody of Lila. His lawyer highlighted Sam's negligence, her misuse of family funds, and the emotional impact her actions had on their daughter. The court reviewed the evidence Elijah had painstakingly gathered: financial records, Derek's testimony, and even messages that revealed Sam's divided attention during Lila's hospital stay. Sam tried to defend herself, claiming she was still a devoted mother despite her mistakes. Her lawyer argued that her infidelity didn't equate to being an unfit parent, but it was a weak defense in the face of overwhelming evidence. The most heartbreaking moment came when Lila was asked to speak in court. She was hesitant at first, her voice trembling as she addressed the judge. "I love my mom," she said quietly, her eyes fixed on the floor. "But she hasn't been there for me the way my dad has. When I needed her, she was busy with other things." The room was silent as Lila continued. "I want to stay with my dad. He's the one who takes care of me, who listens to me. He's always been there, even when things got hard." Sam's face crumpled as Lila's words sank in. She tried to meet her daughter's gaze, but Lila avoided looking at her. It was clear that the bond between them had been severely damaged, and it would take more than words to repair it, if it could be repaired at all. The judge's ruling was swift and decisive. Elijah was awarded full custody of Lila, with Sam granted limited visitation rights under strict conditions. The judge cited Sam's poor judgment and negligence as key factors in the decision. Additionally, Sam was ordered to repay a portion of the misused funds, adding to her mounting financial troubles. The fallout didn't end there. Word of Derek's testimony and the divorce spread quickly within Sam's workplace. Facing a tarnished reputation and questions about her professionalism, she was terminated from her position. The career she had spent years building was gone in an instant, leaving her with no safety net. For Elijah, the ruling brought a sense of relief but also a heavy sadness. While he was grateful to have Lila's trust and the opportunity to provide her with a stable home, the reality of their fractured family was still painful. He saw the toll it took on Lila, who, despite her strength, was still a 16-year-old girl grappling with the betrayal of someone she had once idolized. Sam, on the other hand, was left to face the wreckage of her choices. She had lost her husband, her daughter's trust, her career, and the life she once took for granted. As she left the courtroom that day, she looked back at Elijah and Lila, but neither returned her gaze. It was a stark reminder of what she had thrown away. As Elijah and Lila walked out of the courthouse together, the sun shone brightly, a symbol of the new beginning they were about to embark on. Elijah placed a protective arm around his daughter's shoulder. "We're going to be okay," he said softly, and for the first time in months, he believed it. Lila looked up at him and nodded, a small smile breaking through the sadness. "Yeah, Dad, we will." Together, they stepped into their new future, leaving the chaos of the past behind. Sam's world crumbled around her, piece by piece. The courtroom battle had left her stripped of nearly everything that once defined her life. Derek's betrayal during the proceedings had been the final blow, exposing the affair and unraveling the carefully constructed facade she had tried to maintain. Elijah's airtight case had ensured she lost custody of Lila, the most devastating consequence of all. The judgment was clear. Sam's actions had demonstrated a pattern of selfishness, negligence, and irresponsibility. Her visitation rights were limited to supervised visits, and even those came with conditions. The realization that Lila had chosen her father over her was a wound that cut deeper than she ever expected. Her financial situation was no better. The court ordered her to repay part of the savings she had misused, adding to her mounting debts. Bills began piling up, and without a steady income, she was forced to sell many of her possessions just to stay afloat. Her lavish lifestyle, once funded by her deceit, was now a distant memory. The apartment she had once shared with Elijah and Leela felt eerily empty, stripped of its warmth and purpose. At work, Derek's testimony had irreparably damaged her reputation. Rumors of her affair and the legal battle spread quickly, leaving her colleagues distrustful and her supervisors questioning her integrity. Within weeks, she was called into a meeting and let go, under the guise of restructuring the job she had spent years building. Now, Sam found herself completely alone. Derek, the man she had risked everything for, had severed all ties, leaving her to face the consequences on her own. Friends who once admired her distanced themselves, uncomfortable with the scandal surrounding her name. Family members, disheartened by her choices, offered little more than quiet judgment. Nights were the hardest. Sitting in her empty apartment, she often scrolled through old photos of happier times, family vacations, Lila's birthday parties, quiet evenings with Elijah. The weight of her regret was suffocating. She had traded her family, her stability, and her future for fleeting moments of excitement, and now she was paying the price. As the days passed, Sam struggled to find a way forward. Her choices had left her with nothing but an overwhelming sense of loss and the haunting knowledge that she had brought it all upon herself. Elijah and Lila moved into a quaint, tree-lined neighborhood far from the chaos of their old life. The new house was smaller but felt warm and welcoming, filled with the promise of a fresh start. Elijah focused on creating a peaceful environment for Lila, one where she could heal and thrive. He carved out a corner of the living room as her art space, complete with an easel, shelves of paints, and stacks of sketchbooks. It became her sanctuary, and he encouraged her every step of the way. "Dad, look at this one," Lila said one evening, holding up a painting of a sunlit field. Elijah marveled at the vibrancy and detail. "It's incredible, sweetheart," he said, pride shining in his eyes. "You're going to make something amazing out of this talent." Lila smiled, her confidence growing with each passing day. She joined an art club at school and even submitted her work to a local competition. Elijah made it a point to attend every event, always cheering her on from the front row. Their bond deepened as they leaned on each other, finding strength in their shared determination to move forward. Meanwhile, Sam's life remained in disarray. The loss of custody and the fallout from the divorce weighed heavily on her, but the most painful blow was Lila's refusal to speak with her. Desperate to make amends, Sam sent messages, left voicemails, and even showed up unannounced at Lila's school. Each time, Lila either ignored her or made it clear she wasn't ready to forgive. One weekend, Sam finally convinced Elijah to let her visit. She arrived at their new home, nervous but hopeful. Lila answered the door, her expression guarded. "Hi, sweetheart," Sam began, her voice trembling. "I just wanted to see you, to talk." Lila crossed her arms, her gaze unwavering. "Why now?" she asked coldly. "You had all the time in the world to be there for me, but you chose someone else." Sam's heart broke at the harsh truth of her daughter's words. "I made mistakes, Lila," she said softly. "I was selfish and I hurt you, but I'm trying to change. I want to make things right." Lila shook her head. "It's too late, Mom. You can't just come back and expect everything to be okay. Dad's been here for me through everything. You weren't." Tears streamed down Sam's face as Lila closed the door, leaving her standing alone on the porch. Inside, Elijah watched from the kitchen, his expression unreadable. Later, when Sam had left, he sat down with Lila. "You don't have to see her if you're not ready," he reassured her. "But if you ever change your mind, that's okay too." Lila nodded, leaning against her father. "I just wish she hadn't hurt us like that." "I know," Elijah said quietly. "But we're going to be okay. We already are." Though Elijah couldn't forgive Sam for what she had done, he didn't deny the regret in her actions. When she reached out to him, asking for a second chance to be in Lila's life, he remained firm. "It's not up to me anymore," he told her. "It's up to Lila, and you'll have to live with whatever she decides." As the months passed, Elijah and Lila continued to rebuild their lives. Their home was filled with laughter, creativity, and a sense of stability they hadn't known in years. Though scars from the past lingered, they grew stronger with each passing day, proving that even in the wake of betrayal, hope and resilience could prevail. Years passed, and time began to soften the edges of Lila's anger. Now in her 20s, she had grown into a confident young woman and a talented artist. Her work was gaining recognition, with her first art exhibit scheduled in a prominent gallery. Elijah couldn't have been prouder, watching her transform her pain into beauty and success. It was during this time that Lila decided to reach out to her mother. The years had given her perspective, and while she hadn't forgotten the hurt Sam had caused, she no longer felt burdened by it. She contacted Sam and invited her to meet for coffee. The meeting was awkward but civil, marked by hesitant smiles and cautious conversation. "I'm not ready to fully let you in," Lila admitted, "but I think we can try to start over, slowly." Sam, now older and visibly worn by the consequences of her choices, nodded with tears in her eyes. "That's all I could ever hope for," she said, her voice trembling. "Thank you for giving me this chance." Though they began to reconnect, Lila kept boundaries firmly in place. Their relationship was polite but distant, a reflection of the trust that had been lost. Sam understood and respected Lila's terms, grateful for even the smallest steps toward redemption. Meanwhile, Elijah continued to thrive in the new life he had built. He had moved on from the pain of the past, focusing on his work, friendships, and most importantly, his role as Lila's unwavering support system. The sense of peace he felt was something he hadn't imagined possible during those dark years, but now it was his reality. The night of Lila's art exhibit was a culmination of everything they had endured and overcome. The gallery was filled with visitors admiring her work, each piece a testament to her talent and resilience. Elijah stood proudly at the center of the crowd. When she noticed him, she walked over, her face lighting up with a radiant smile. "Thank you, Dad," she said softly, "for everything." Elijah hugged her tightly. "You're incredible, Lila. I'm so proud of you." As the evening drew to a close, Elijah stood back, taking in the scene. The glowing faces of those admiring Lila's art, the joy in her expression, the life they had built together. Despite the pain of the past, they had come through stronger, their bond unshakable. In that moment, Elijah felt nothing but hope, gratitude, and the enduring love of a father for his daughter.